to Listening Librarians. Katie and I have a very special guest today. We have Miss Melanie from the Children's Department to talk to us about middle grade books. So, can you give us just a brief introduction to what middle grade books are?
Sure. Middle grade books, we have them down in our children's department here at the library, and they typically cover grades 3 to about 6th grade. Usually the sweet spot's about 4th to 6th grade. We have all the genres down there. So we'll have, fantasy books, animal books, realistic fiction, everything that you would find in an adult section would be downstairs for children. They're age appropriate. The main characters are going to be in that age group. Sometimes they bump up a little bit to middle school, but everything is going to be geared for that age range and appropriate for that age range, and sort of focus on topics that are relevant for that particular age group too.
Okay.
So super fun reads, I think.
Yeah, and they're ones that adults can appreciate too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. For sure. I mean, I really like them. You guys like them. It's not just for kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So each of us have a couple of books or series that we want to discuss with you today. So Katie, why don't you go ahead and give us their first selection?
So one of the ones I listened to was Pilar, Ramirez, and the Escape from Zafa. So this is by Julian Randall, and it's about 7 hours long, and it was narrated by Amanda Alcantara, and I'll talk a little bit more about her. But the plot really revolves around a 12-year-old named Pilar, and she really just wants people to say her name right. And so she wants two things: the name, and she also wants to find out what happened to her mother's cousin, Natasha. So when her mother, who was like best friends with her cousin Natasha when they were younger, Natasha went missing in the Dominican Republic where they had grown up. And this was about 50 years ago. And so Pilar is this budding journalist, and she wants to make a video documentary kind of talking about the political climate in the Dominican Republic at that time, and, then Natasha's life. And she gets this news that there is a local college professor who is also focusing some of his research on that dictator who is in the Dominican Republic at the time. And so she wants to meet with him. And while she's snooping around in his office while he's not there, she actually gets sucked into this magical world. And this magical world is called Zafa. And in this world, there's all sorts of, cool coconut demons and shapeshifters and nice witches. And Natasha is there. So, and we find out Natasha is actually being held prisoner by El Cuco, who is the Dominican equivalent of the boogeyman. So, it kind of sets up this nice, magical battle that's going to have to take place. Now, our narrator, Amanda Alcantara, her narration is spot on for a sarcastic 12-year-old. And she just really makes Pilar this unforgettable heroine. So I enjoyed it. And book 2 just came out this past February. So I haven't gotten to that yet, but it's on my list of to be listened to.
Excellent.
Yeah. Nice. What about you, Melanie? What did you listen to?
It's fun. Well, my first one I listened to is called Stuntboy in the Meantime. It's by Jason Reynolds. It's about 3 hours long, and it's read by a full cast. And I have to say, I love full cast productions. You feel like you're, listening to a play, really. Yeah. There's so much fun, and you really get a feel for the characters and the different voices. They're just a lot of fun. And this one in particular is about a young boy. He's about 10. His name is Portico Reeves.
It's a great name.
I know, right? Portico Reeves. He says he lives in a castle, but really it's an apartment building. And he has something that he calls the frets, which is anxiety. That's what he calls his anxiety. And he has sort of episodes where the frets kind of take over in different types of situations. So he has this best friend. Her name is Zola. She also lives in the apartment building. She lives 1.5 doors down. And she kind of helps him when he gets the frets. She teaches him how to meditate. They do yoga. I know, it's very, very nice. And she kind of helps him manage it. And together they create Stuntboy, which is his superhero. And it's the superhero that nobody knows about. But the superhero steps in and saves the day when he's needed. Okay. And it's also a way for him to manage his anxiety. And so he's dealing with a couple things. His parents are fighting all the time, which is not great. And so that sort of is taking up a lot of his energy, trying to manage that. And there's also a bully who also lives in the building. And his name is Herbert Singletary. The worst. That's what they call him. Which I love. Yeah. And Herbert sort of is just always there, always lurking, always ready to like make things worse, make fun of him and Zola. You know, he's just the typical bully. Yeah. You know, he's like his nemesis. And he just makes things difficult for him. And so the book is basically about Stuntboy stepping in. He has some really funny moves that he likes to use. One's called the Zamarilla Zigzag. And so, you know, there's all these different moves that he does. And they have these really cool names. And, you know, he's navigating his anxiety, his parents fighting. You kind of find out what happens there. And I appreciate that it's pretty realistic. It doesn't have that ultimate happy ending that, you know, everybody learns to cope, everybody learns to manage, but it's not really, his parents do end up getting a divorce, so that happens, but he has Zola, and, you know, things with Herbert kind of take a turn a little bit too, because maybe Herbert's not all bad, so there's that component to it as well, and it is a really, really funny book. The cast is great. There are musical interludes throughout, which is great. There are commercial breaks where it's kind of almost like an infomercial where they tell you something or they give you some information, or Portico does something and then they take a commercial break to remind everybody that you really shouldn't do that. You know, just little things like that. So it's a great book. It's very manageable because it's only 3 hours long. It holds your attention the whole entire time. And it's just a really, really sweet story. And the second one is coming out in a couple of months. So, we get to find out what happens next with Stuntboy. Exactly.
Excellent. Well, my first book is fairly recent. It came out 2021, and it's called Res Dogs by the Indigenous author Joseph Bruchac. And in this one, our main character is Malian, who her family, she and her parents actually live in Boston, but she's visiting her grandparents on a Wabanaki reservation when the pandemic really hits home and everybody's got their stay-at-home orders. So now she's sheltering in place with her grandparents, which that's fine. She loves her grandparents and she can do her school online, but you know, she misses her mom and dad too. So this is a chance for her to learn more about her heritage from her grandparents who enjoy telling her stories. And one of the stories that kind of gets threaded through is about how one of their ancestors or relatives was in a tough situation and this dog came to him and became really good friends, and there was a bond that carried through. And one day, a dog shows up on their doorstep who looks kind of like a wolf, and she names him Malsum, and the two of them just become best friends and both have ways to protect one another, and it's a really wonderful way for her to be able to deal with a very difficult time. The book is actually a novel in verse. but the way it's told, the way it's read by the author, it sounds very much like oral storytelling, like you would expect.
Cool.
The grandparents are just telling this story.
Yeah.
It's great. And it will have some indigenous words scattered throughout, but they're all within context, so it's really easy to figure out what they're talking about. It's really quick. It's just over an hour and a half. And it's really a wonderful story of how indigenous communities throughout history have cared for each other, whether it's in a pandemic or in war or whatever. It's a group of people who see each other as connected and family and work together to work through whatever they need to. So it was a really nice, uplifting story to remind us, those early days of the pandemic, we also kind of did that as well, but in a different way.
I think it's nice, too, to see that anytime an underrepresented community is highlighted, this is really nice to read about something like that.
Yeah.
Sort of learn more about an indigenous community and how they come together, which is not typical for what you get. So
but nice. Also to get a different perspective on the things that are just every day.
Yes, exactly.
Nice. Well, I stepped away from people for my next one. And so I'm going to talk about an older book. It's actually from 2004, and it is book 1 in a series. And the book 1 is called Into the Wild. It's part of the Warriors series. Now, my kiddo, Ella, saw this book when they were maybe 5 years old and insisted I buy it, even though it was middle grade and way above the level where I'd be able to read it to them at night, because it has a kitty on the front, and we've always loved cats. But they've recently gotten super into this Warrior series, and so as a mom, I was like, well, now I have to read the series, and it's actually really good. So the series is by Erin Hunter. And all of the books have been narrated by MacLeod Andrews. They all average about 7 hours. I'm just going to talk about this first book, and then if you like it, there's 16 more. Our story starts with Rusty, and he's an orange tabby cat. He lives with a family where he's an indoor-outdoor cat, and he decides to venture into the forest that kind of borders his family's land to just catch a mouse. And while he is catching the mouse, he is approached by another cat, and who is like, hey, you're on our land, you can't take our prey. And Rusty's kind of like, what? And so he learns that there are these 4 clans of cats who live in the different parts of the surrounding forest. And there is a hierarchical structure. So the person he actually meets is an apprentice warrior. So he's training to be a hunter. They're about the same age. And then one of the actual full deputy warrior cats comes up while they're talking and says, I was watching you and you are good at hunting and we need warriors. You should join our clan. But you have to leave behind all the they call him a kitty pet. He's like, you got to leave behind all the kitty pet stuff. So ditch the collar, ditch being fed every day from a bowl. Yeah. But you're going to have a better life in the forest. So he decides, yes, he's going to go live with this group of feral cats. And so that is the Thunder Clan. So there's multiple clans. He joins the Thunder Clan. They give him a new name. So he becomes Firepaw. And then you kind of follow Rusty's journey throughout the rest of the series. And then there's sub-series that focus on his grandchildren or, and so on. So as Rusty integrates into this new clan, there's of course feelings that kids will relate to of he feels like an outsider. And it sometimes actually gets really deep and darker than I would have expected for a book for this age group. I wouldn't maybe necessarily offer this to a kid who is a big empath because there's fighting amongst the cats, and it sometimes doesn't end well for maybe one of the cats. But it's a lot of fun, a great lively adventure. I would say my only issue with it being an audiobook is all their names sound the same. So that hierarchical structure. So like Rusty becomes Firepaw, but then when he becomes like one of the leaders, he becomes like Firestar. And so you have to remember like, oh, well, Tiger Paw became Tiger Tail, and then he became Tiger Star, or
Oh gosh.
and then the fact that they all end in like paw or tail, or not all of them, but a lot of them do. And so that's the only thing, like, for a middle grade, I'm like, I gotta really pay attention to this, sometimes more than the adult books, but it's a good adventure story.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Fun to see something different. Like,
Yeah.
Not people.
Cats. But still situations that a person would relate to.
Yeah. Well, I took a darker turn too a little bit. The next one I picked was The Outlaws, Scarlett and Browne. It came out in 2021. It's by Jonathan Stroud, who did the Lockwood & Co. series.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a really popular series. It's a little bit longer. It's about 12 hours. So this is perfect if you've got a long car trip. But yeah, some free time. And it's read by Sophie Aldred. She does a really, really great job with this. And it's about an outlaw. Her name is Scarlett. They don't give her age, but I'd say she's probably like teens, somewhere in the teens, like early-ish teens. And she wanders this sort of fractured, kind of apocalyptic, dystopian England, where there are 7 surviving towns that are ruled by houses of faith. And the local militia, and then the local sort of like affluent families who have lived in those towns for many, many, many generations. There was a catastrophic event that happened in England, and now this is what's left. So she sort of roams the country, robbing banks. She does kill a lot of people, so there's that component to it. Yeah, she does. I know.
Wow.
I know. She does what she has to do to survive. And so she's on the run after robbing a bank, and she happens upon this bus accident. And the only survivor of this bus accident, who's been trapped in the bathroom of the bus for several days, is Albert Browne. And they could not be more different. Scarlett, because of how she lives, is very practical. She's pragmatic. She's sarcastic. And Albert's very naive. He's very cheerful. He's very energetic. He sees the wonders in the world still, whereas she has sort of given up on that because of,
what she's encountered.
Yes, what she's experienced and because of what she's encountered. So, they team up, obviously, sort of out of necessity, and she's being chased by a local militia, and they find out that Albert's also being chased because he's harboring kind of a secret. He has a superpower, and I know, and his superpower is that he can read people's minds. And he's been kept in this kind of hospital asylum because of this superpower, and it's really a place where people who have any sort of difference are sent, and so he escapes out of there, and that's where he ends up on the bus, and then they end up together. So they team up because they're both fleeing these situations. And so even though first Scarlett doesn't want anything to do with him, but he's always so kind to her. And, of course, throughout the book, things get better between the two of them. And they realize, like, they complement each other pretty well. They're actually really good friends. They start to care for one another. And that's kind of the nature of the story. Slowly you figure out more about Albert. You learn about what he's running from. You learn a little bit about Scarlett. But there's going to be another book coming out, book 2. And so I think you'll probably learn a little bit more about her background then. You don't learn a lot about her right at this point. But there's a few interesting secondary characters, a grandpa named Joe and his daughter Eddie. He navigates a boat, and they escape on the boat, and they sort of become friends and allies with them too. And so, there's a big sort of end scene where you think, okay, things are going to get better. They do a little bit. You think they're going to go their separate ways, but do they? Probably not. If there's a second book coming out.
We can hope.
Yeah.
Yes, we can only hope that they stick together and they continue their, outlaw ways. I will say it's a little bit dark. There is quite a bit. Oh, and also there are these zombie... I know.
It's got everything.
It does. It has a little bit of everything
What
in
doesn't
it.
it have?
I know. And the zombies are called the Tainted. And they sort of roam around too. So that's a real danger because these 7 surviving towns are all heavily fortified.
Right.
You don't go out after dark, because you don't want to get caught and eaten by the Tainted.
Yeah.
And so there's like the zombie component to it too. So I know there's so much in it. Like there's really, there's a lot, but it's they're very well-drawn characters. It's witty, but it is pretty dark as well. There's a lot of, there's death, dying, people being killed, things like that. Yeah. So, but nothing gratuitous. It's, it's everybody surviving in the way that they can.
Yeah.
So. But it was really kind of a fun. It's a great adventure.
Yeah.
Sounds
like it.
Yeah, it was really. There's a ton going on. So I loved it, and I highly recommend it, and I look forward to book 2 coming out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my second pick is actually a pair of books. We have a finished duology, and that is, the first book is Sal and Gabi Break the Universe, and the second book is Sal and Gabi Fix the Universe. And this duology is part of the Rick Riordan Presents series, which, pretty much anything in that series that I've read, I've loved.
Yeah,
There's
they're
some great stories. These are by Carlos Hernandez, and they're narrated by Anthony Ray Perez, who's a wonderful, delightful narrator. The first book's just over 9.5 hours. The second book's closer to 11. And both of them feature Sal Vidon, who is a middle schooler. His mother died a couple years ago, and he's got diabetes, but he also gets anxious too. So he's had to learn how to meditate and relax. And one thing he has discovered in practicing this meditation and relaxation is that when he does that, he can reach across the time-space continuum and rip a hole in the universe.
Potentially problematic.
That's something.
But cool.
But Sal really likes magic tricks, and so he can use this to advantage.
Yes.
Yeah.
So one day he's there at his locker, and he's getting kind of bullied by another kid in his class, and that kid, can't remember the combination to his locker, and so Sal decides to just play with him a little bit. And ends up, just kind of ripping a little hole in the universe inside this kid's locker and leaves a dead chicken in the locker. Of course, this ensues with a trip to the principal's office.
Yes.
But while he's there, he meets the very charismatic student council president, Gabi, who comes in to act as lawyer to this other kid, who she knows and is trying to help with schoolwork. And she pulls him aside later, and she's like, I want to know how you did this. What's going on? That's just not possible. What did you do? And the two of them gradually become friends and get to know each other's families pretty well, because Sal, his father is a scientist who is familiar with this whole ripping holes in the universe kind of thing. That's kind of in his area of study, so he tries to help Sal with it. His stepmother is really sweet. And then Gabi's family, she has a mom, and then she has a group called the Gabi Dads, who are folks, men and women, who have kind of been adopted into the family, but they're a hysterical crew. I mean, as side characters, the Gabi dads are perfect. You've got Lightning Dad, who's like a local TV meteorologist.
Nice.
There's the bearded, flannel-wearing dad known as Grizzly Dadums.
Nice.
And then my favorite one, the stuntman dad, is Dad Man. I mean, you just gotta love that. So, you know, they get to be friends, they have adventures, end up ripping some more holes in the universe, having to fix the holes in the universe. There's a whole lot going on, interspersed with all of the family and friendship things too, which I think are just as important a part of the story as the adventures.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's all going to be happy ending by the very end of it. And it's just so much fun.
Sounds like it.
You'd really love to see these kids grow up and do even more fun and wild and crazy things.
Maybe they should make it a trilogy.
Or, you know, do a YA
Yeah.
duology.
Yeah, that would work too.
Get them in high school.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. Keep it going.
Yeah. So, good times. I'm glad I finally got around to that particular series.
Mhm.
I think that won the Pura Belpre
It
award
might have.
too. Yeah,
It
the
might
year it
have.
came out. One of them.
Yeah. And I kind of think one of them, I don't know if it was a Hugo for like, it was a Hugo or the other one. It got a sci-fi type award too, one of the
Nice.
books.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for the younger set.
That's fun.
Well, thank you so much for joining
Yeah,
us.
it's been
Thanks for
fun.
having me. I love this.
We've got more
Loved it.
books to read now.
Yes, we do. I'm going to go downstairs.
Start picking out some
Right,
more.
exactly. Start making my list.
So next month,
Yes, June we will be back with historical fiction, which is one
Yes.
of my most often read genres. So it's actually going to be hard for me to pick what to talk about. So come back and see what choices we will be discussing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, you know, hope you enjoy your audiobooks as much as we've been enjoying ours.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.